Hello, Wake Up New Zealand, Carol Sakey speaking. This is the second video of several videos I'm actually going to do about global migration, how our local and central government are involved in that, and what Winston Peters didn't tell us in 2018, December 2018, when he signed the UN Global Compact of Migration, after him telling us not to worry, this is not legally binding. He didn't explain about how things could change once this non-binding agreement enters soft law in New Zealand, how it can easily, quickly, through advantage of soft law, be introduced into our domestic laws, making it legally binding and legislation, as did UN Agenda 2030. So climate refugees. Now, we're hearing about climate refugees, of course, because the UN, Tedros, has just announced that UN states like New Zealand must actually take much stronger, bolder climate action within nations and with people in their nations. And he called it desperate action. So we've gone from global cooling, global warming, climate change, red flags climate change, to climate emergency, climate crisis, and now we have a desperate climate action. So he added that, populations of refugees that will be displaced through climate change actually taking up residence in other countries. So you're talking about open borders that threaten national security, risk a huge increase in child trafficking, human trafficking. Climate refugees have human rights to adequate food, health, housing, rights that you do not have. Zilch political responsibility, increased surveillance enforcement, mobilising finance at taxpayer expense. This is what this all means. A flooding of refugee migrants to purposely dilute sovereign nations to articulate global citizenship in a world without borders. And I was foo-fooed when I mentioned a world without borders. And here the UN, under Mayor's mechanism, talks about a world without borders. And climate change is happening. We see it every day. So UN member states, they must take desperate climate action measures. And it's said that too much money is spent on law enforcement on borders. So it's time for climate justice. That was COP26. It's time to fund loss and damage over border closures. Borders must be open. Surveillance and enforcement, that's on use. So Open Society's Foundation founder and head of Open Society's Foundation, of course, is George Soros, and he's played quite a key role as a philanthropist, funding global migration policies, international laws, and implementing them. And he said when he was interviewed, I see myself as a kind of God. If the truth be known, I took some Masonic fantasies with me from childhood. I felt I could control everything. So the Open Societies Foundation is the world's largest philanthropist funder. Soros has also got huge invested interest in the 10 most wealthiest companies in the world. So independent news actually re-questioned Soros on what he said in his statement about seeing himself as a kind of God. And he said, I have kind of a disease when a person is considered a kind of God, the creator of everything you know, but I feel comfortable this way. I live with it well. Yes, and he is very involved in global social political development. One of the key funders of the International Legalized Utopia, the Blueprint, a path of the global utopian future. So Soros and his indulgence in mechanisms and global migration. So 2018, let's go back to Winston Peters when he represented New Zealand. He did not tell the people of New Zealand when the Global Compact came up. It was all very quiet, and it wasn't an MP that actually let that out publicly that was happening. It was a member of the public. Hardly anyone knew about it. They didn't know what it involved. So when I put the petition together, I had to actually educate people as to what that involved. I had to educate myself. I had never, ever had to deal with looking and researching a political policy, let alone a global international agreement. So I had to learn that, and whilst doing that, was teaching others as well. So I put my petition application in several times. Several times they returned it, said the wording wasn't right. So the government get to choose the wording. But with the 13 days I had left, I did get 6,521 people on Facebook to actually sign that. And I got several posts saying to me, look, the numbers are not going up, and we've signed it. And then I contacted the petitions office, and they said, well, sorry, we have a techno problem, and this is why it's happening. And I guess that's happened many times. So the petition application went backwards and forwards, and this is quite common. So my 70-page submission was actually put through. I call it an objection, and started giving speeches down at 80 Square. Others jumped on board. New Conservative jumped on board, and others, groups, individuals jumped on board opposing UN Global Compact and migration. The national government did it first, and then they changed their minds. So that's what happened. They were on the same page as the rest of the MPs, and they were all for the UN Global Compact and Migration. So I was speaking out down at 80 Square with others, and that was the first time I knew there was something terribly wrong in New Zealand when I had police cameras in my face and police officers standing in a line telling me, demanding that I go home now. And as soon as that happened, I thought, oh my gosh, New Zealand's in trouble. We are really in trouble. And that was the first signs I saw of it. So as for the signing of the Morocco Global Compact for Safe and Orderly Regular Migration, UN Global Compact Migration, it's the first ever global compact on migration ever, a common approach to migration in all dimensions. The commitment to develop the compact was contained in the 2016 New York Refugee Declaration, and that was adopted by 193 members of member states, UN nations, who had approved of that. So 164 UN nations approved of the UN Global Compact on Migration. And UN Agenda 2030, all UN member nations, 193 of them, actually adopted UN Agenda 2030, and Ardern was the first to enter that from soft law to hard law, soft law, non-binding, to hard law, binding statutes of law into Parliament. Hence coming from non-binding to now a legally binding law. So, legislation. So, in that legislation, Peters also didn't tell us it was a key, important part of UN Agenda 2030. So, UN Global Compact on Migration is a very important part to establish UN Agenda 2030, the Global Development Goals. He did not tell us that. So, when it comes to these soft law non-binding international agreements, there is no need, it's not required to seek consensus from MPs in the House. It's just naturally accepted. There's no argument about it. It's just naturally accepted once they have adopted it. And that's what happens. So Peters didn't explain that the judicial could use the UN Global Compact on Migration to interpret judicial cases in the courts. So he didn't tell us also at the time that this was being adopted at the very same time in the same place, Marrakesh. The Global Marrakesh Mayors Declaration was being adopted. A Global Mayors Council was being formed. These two agreements being an important key target in the UN Agenda 2030, UN Global Development Goals. That's referring to local regional governments accelerating migration within cities, urbanisation. The milestones are, and this is how it goes, 2007, the Global Forum on Migration and Development, state-led, informal, it was an informal, non-binding process to shape global migration and development, to form close relations with central and local governments within nations. So 2015, September, we had the adopted UN Agenda 2030 and the 17 global goals with the 169 targets within them. That was adopted in New Zealand and then later went from soft law to hard law and now legislation. And Ardern boasted that we were the first country in the world to do that at a Gates gathering when she was invited as a speaker for the Global Shapers, WEF. So 2016, all UN member states adopted the New York Declaration of Refugees. In 2018, UN member states adopted UN Global Compact on Migration. Now, not all states adopted that. I believe 164 states adopted that. And there was a lot of controversy around it. So 2018, same geographical place, the Global Mayors Marrakesh Declaration was being adopted, and also a Global Mayors Migration Council was established at the same time. And this is the backbone of the architecture for migration governance worldwide. So 2019, the first Global Refugee Forum, and that included local regional governments, which mayors mechanism implementing accelerating migration. 2020, we had the mayors mechanism giving local regional governments more access to global migration governance discussions than ever before. Invited their first UN review on global migration mechanisms and processes. Then you have 221, 200 plus local regional governments share best practices to meet global migration. Mayors join high-level official meetings to review the Global Compact on Migration, to review the Global Compact of Refugees, the Mayors mechanism for renewing partnership and expanding the scope of migration globally. So the Global Forum for Migration and Development includes diverse stakeholders, NGOs, migrants, local governments, academia, and this is about formal migration mechanisms. This includes a business mechanism also. So the Global Forum for Migration and Development includes diverse stakeholders. The emphasis is on whole of government and whole of societies. So that's the whole approach to migration governance, recognising the value of local governments and mayors, the mayor's mechanism, jointly steered by united cities and local governments, the Mayors Migration Council and the International Organization of Migration, city networks worldwide launched a call for action for global migration, migrants and refugees. So you got May 2022 last year, the Mayors mechanism, objective to capture local action and political leadership that meets and exceeds global goals. So it goes beyond and exceeds global goals of migration. A local action, a collaborative effort between the Mayors mechanism, the steering committee member, executed in partnership with the UN Refugee Agency. So Winston Peters neglected to tell us quite a bit about what was going on. He downplayed it, purposely so. He didn't tell us that this Mayor Global Council was being established at the same time, same place. He didn't tell us about the mayoral declaration, the Marrakesh mayoral declaration, and what that involved, local councils, our own local councils, making migration integration future ready. So, future well-known megatrends and little-known potential, united cities and local government. So you had UN Secretary General Tedros recently called UN member states to action climate change as desperation, from red flags, emergency crisis, to desperation. And reference was made to climate change migration, integration of migration into natural disasters. So my next video, I want to actually share with you about this climate change migration and Climate Migration 22 and our Transforming Our World Agenda 2030 Global Development Goals with the contribution of migration, global citizenship. So as I say, my gut personal feelings are that swamp sovereign countries with migrants, refugees, and I look at all the pack and stacks that are going up and who's going to be living in those, and a lot of them are empty, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, so if you swamp the country with different ethnic groups, swamp them with the population with more of them than us, so it's lopsided, then surely that is diluting our nationhood of people, our traditions, etc. So when iwi, hapu, whānau, Maori talk about their cultures and traditions, they should not be targeting those of Western nations. Because under the socialist Marxist government, it's a socialist governance on steroids, communism, have finished with their goal of migration through central local governance to dilute our country of its nationhood. Where do you stand with your cultures and traditions then? Are they thinking about you? No. They are busy paying the few elite off while others, like all of us, are struggling. And we don't know what's around the next corner. And it just keeps on coming here, 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 here. And some people just don't know what to think anymore. And you can't blame them. But I'm not a bearer of good news, but the point is you need to be informed because we are in election year, general election year, and you need to be able to say to people, look, we know this is happening, and we want to know why you agreed to it. Hold them to account all the way, every one of them. But Winston Peters, you neglected the people of New Zealand. You did not tell them the whole truth. You deliberately left a lot out in 2018. You undermined our nationhood. Non-binding, and it means nothing. Come on. It means everything. Wake up, New Zealand. I will actually put this on my website so that you actually have the links to everything I am sharing with you. But I will be doing that in the next few days, and you'll be able to print that off. Wake up, New Zealand. And another video on the way.